Thanks for spending part of your morning with us. Did you make your way to school this morning? Make your way to work this morning? Hope you will take just a moment to look around and find something good and try to soak that up, because there is plenty of evil in this world. We saw it 24 years ago today with the attacks of September 11th on the World Trade Center, on Washington, D.C., and on that plane that violently landed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We saw it again yesterday in the assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah while speaking on a college campus. Mike Hurst joins us now, former U.S. attorney and chair of the Mississippi Republican Party. Mike, always appreciate your time. It's good to be with you. And you and I were texting back and forth last night a little bit, and I think we shared a similar sentiment, and that's there are a whole range of emotions. And for whatever reason, this tragic event, talking about the death of Charlie Kirk yesterday, seems to have hit a little harder than some.
Yeah, absolutely it did, Richard. Yeah, just trying to process these emotions. And I think why it hit us so hard, and I had interactions with my kids, my grown kids, my teenage kids yesterday, but I think why it hit us so hard is because the way I viewed Charlie Kirk was a happy warrior. I mean, he
Mm.
wasn't threatening anyone. He wasn't calling for violence. He was out there, you know, living the American dream. Here's a guy that didn't go to college, but wanted to encourage the youth to get involved, to speak openly. I mean, this guy was all about free speech, patriotism, the rule of law, and frankly, his love of God. I heard one commentator describe him as kind of a mix between Billy Graham and Rush Limbaugh,
Mm.
and that someone thought that he was so. I think this is proof positive that Satan is in our world, that evil like this can happen in front of thousands and thousands of kids and now spread throughout the world, to try to silence the values and the principles that we hold dear here in America. So yeah, it has really struck me and my family and many of my friends very, very hard.
I certainly don't want to dwell on the coverage, especially the negative coverage of yesterday's event. But I played a clip earlier from MSNBC where Matthew Dowd made the ridiculous assertion that one of his supporters could be shooting a gun off into the air in celebration. And then he went on to describe Charlie Kirk's message as hate speech. And when you speak hatefully, you can expect reactions like this, almost framing it as if he brought this upon himself. The thing that struck me is not how out of touch that particular analysis was. The thing that struck me is I have trouble understanding how some people look at a situation and it's just the polar opposite of the way I see it, or the way you see it, or the way that rationally thinking people see it. Because Charlie Kirk's message, despite the fact that he spoke out against things that he disagreed with, was a message that was filled with love and openness and a willingness for discourse. It was the opposite of hate speech.
Mm, yeah, we have to remember that this issue was so important to our founding fathers that they made it the literal First Amendment to our Constitution. Um, our society is a free society because it's built on, open assembly, civil debate, viewpoint diversity. And for someone to be gunned down because they disagreed with someone else is just totally antithetical to everything that we stand for in America. Um, I think that's what, when I was texting my kids yesterday and they had alerted me, I was in the middle of work and they alerted me to this. I was like you, I didn't know my kids really followed Charlie Kirk. Um, but he had a powerful effect on from 25 years old to, my 18-year-old. He had a positive effect on them. And I'll never forget when they texted that Charlie had died. The first response from my 20-year-old son was freedom of speech is dead. And that
Mm.
that has literally stuck with me, that That's the way some of our youth perceive this is you cannot speak openly, you cannot speak honestly, you cannot express your opinion for now, fear of death.
And that's a heartbreaking message to hear from your
Mm,
son. And it's it's hard to take ourselves back to 18, 20, 22 years old and remember the way that we viewed the world and the way we processed events. Many of us were in that age range when the attacks of September 11th happened, and so we processed those events probably in a different way than our parents did at the time. But to that message from your son, I think Charlie Kirk would say, no, it's absolutely the opposite. It's the power of free speech that has brought this out, and it's the only thing that has the chance to sustain us.
right. And what you said earlier before I came on has really resonated with me because when I pulled up my Bible app yesterday, the first thing that popped up, I mean, this is only God. The first thing that pops up is First Thessalonians 5. If you go back and read that chapter, it talks about how God's children, are children of the light, children of the day. And it says, Paul says, he warns us against those who are idle, disruptive. He tells us to encourage the disheartened, to help the weak, to be patient with everyone, and to rejoice always, to pray continually, and to give thanks in all circumstances. For that's who we are as God's children. So I couldn't agree more with you that we've got to remember that. We put out a statement yesterday with the Mississippi Republican Party, and I just called upon our fellow Americans just to be reminded that we are first and foremost Americans. We're not enemies. If I disagree with a Democrat, if I disagree with an independent, it's not, you are not my enemy. We just disagree. And that's the way we have to remember that. At the end of the day, we're all Americans, and frankly, we're all human beings.
Mike, I almost hesitate to go down this road because I don't know that I know that we don't need more divisiveness, but I was struck by former presidents making statements about political violence. And when I say I was watching some of Fox News's coverage, and oh goodness, the from Memphis, Harold. I just lost his
Ford,
name.
Harold
Yes,
Ford.
Harold Ford Jr., who I find to be refreshingly insightful a lot of the time. I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but there are a lot of things that he says that I do agree with. And he talked about his time in law school and debate and going through, diametrically opposed viewpoints and talking those out, and some of those being great memories that he had from his time in college. And I was left with the question of how did we get here? How did we get to the point where it's so dark and a differing viewpoint equals an enemy? I can't help but think back to President Barack Obama's presidency and wonder if something changed during that window in our nation's history. And like I said, I hesitate to say that out loud because I don't want to create more divisiveness, but it feels like there was a tone change in the United States during that time. Am I off base on that?
When you just said that and Harold Ford's experience in college, I had a similar experience in college. I went to a great school, Millsaps College, but it was not a conservative bastion by any means. I think there were four of us in the college, Republicans at Millsaps. And then I went to law school at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Again, a very, very small minority of conservative thought. So I agree with Harold Ford Jr. that our universities, our college campuses are places where we should openly debate these ideas. We should engage with people we disagree with. Um, but what we've seen over the last probably 10 years is the left, unfortunately, has shut down any type of debate, whether it was a conservative commentator coming to the school, whether it was a Fifth Circuit judge appointed by President Trump, who was shouted down and shut down by not just students but by faculty. I mean, we've really lost something when the institutions that are supposed to be the petri dishes of open debate and free speech in our society are the ones that are really shutting down that. and really dividing us as Americans. I think that's why Charlie Kirk was so effective, because he went to these college campuses. He engaged anyone who wanted to debate with him, and he did it again with a smile, with grace, but with courage and with boldness in his beliefs. And I think that's how we as Americans have to continue that and not make this personal, not make this violent. We've just got to be able to debate and discuss things with each other without harming each other.
Visiting with Mike Hurst, chairman of the Republican Party in Mississippi, former U.S. attorney. I know you're on the road. You got time to hang with me for a little longer, or you need to run?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we can hang.
We're going to look back 24 years on the other side of this timeout, and we'll ask Mike what he remembers about that particular day. It's one of those days that is etched in the minds and the hearts and the souls of all of us, if we were old enough to kind of be aware of what was going on. One of those days where you can say, I remember exactly what I was doing when this happened. It's more Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi after this. Welcome again, Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. There are lots of ways for you to consume news, and I appreciate you spending part of the start of your day with us. We have 3 goals today. This is a different show than we normally do. We want to remember the lives lost 24 years ago today, September 11th, 2001. We want to remember the life of Charlie Kirk and his mission, and look closely at the things that happened yesterday. And the challenge that I have given to you is, let's also try to find light in what is an increasingly dark world. And I want to do that by you sharing with me, and then me sharing some of your stories and some of your anecdotes. Where do you see light? Is it in your kids? Is it in your marriage? Is it in your church? Is it in things that you're seeing on a daily basis? Because I think we all can use some light, and I want to share those stories and try to have some uplifting moments as well. So please keep those coming. That's our focus today. It's going to be the focus until we wrap things up at 9 o'clock. Mike Hurst is my guest right now, continuing our conversation. He's chair of the Mississippi Republican Party, former U.S. attorney. And, Mike, as I mentioned before the break, September 11th, 2001, one of those days that is just permanently etched into our memories, our heart, our soul, our gut, our brain. And it's crazy that 2.5, almost decades later, many, many people remember vividly all of the details of what they did and where they were and who they were with on that particular day. What are those details for you?
Well, I was living in Washington, D.C., or in Alexandria, Virginia, and working in Washington, D.C. I took the subway early that morning into the district to work at my job at a law firm. I was in a conference room with clients when someone came in and said a plane had hit one of the World Trade Center towers. And at first, we just thought it was a mistake, maybe a pilot error. And then a few minutes later, someone came in and said another plane had hit another one of the towers. And people in our office started scrambling. I called my wife, who we had a 15-month-old. She was pregnant. And I said, I'm just going to go up to north part of DC to a friend's home because the subway was completely clogged or shut down. I couldn't get home. And then after I hung up, I thought more about it, and I found a good a good Irish Catholic buddy of mine from Chicago who was in the office, who also lived in Alexandria. I said, let's walk home, which was 14 miles, Richard. And so we started the journey down to the Potomac
Did you
River.
have a
We
pair
got
of
there.
sneakers handy, or was this in
No,
lace-up
no.
wingtips?
Good old loafers. Yep, good old. I was 25 years old at the time, so much easier back then. But I get to the Potomac River Bridge, and federal law enforcement is standing there, and they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "We're going home." They said, "You can't walk across this bridge." So me and my buddy flagged down a van full of other people, and we hopped in the van of strangers and took it across the Potomac River Bridge and got there. And when we came across the bridge, Richard, we could see the Pentagon smoldering. The plane had just hit the Pentagon. It was still on fire. Law enforcement was still
So when
responding.
you left, Mike, when you left your office, the news of the plane hitting the Pentagon had not, or it had not actually happened yet. You just said,
The
"Let's go."
plane had not yet hit the Pentagon when I left the office. And so when I came over the bridge and we were standing, if you've ever been on 395 right there in Virginia, we were standing looking at the Pentagon, which had just been hit and was still on fire and smoldering. And as we continue to walk, another federal law enforcement, I think maybe FBI agent, came up to us and said, "What are you doing here?" And we said, "We're just going home to Alexandria." She said, "Well, get out of here because there's another plane in the air headed this way to Washington, D.C. We don't know if it's coming to the White House or the U.S. Capitol, but it's on its way." And that was the plane that the brave members, the brave individuals on that plane that fought back against the terrorists and ultimately fell
United
in
Flight
Shanksville,
93.
Pennsylvania. Yes. So we hurried. We stepped up our pace a little bit. We got down to about Washington Reagan National Airport, and this car with two young ladies pulled over, picked us up, and took us the rest of the 10 miles home. So I remember when I got out of my that car and I was walking down the street. My wife and my 15-month-old were standing on the sidewalk talking to other neighbors in our little small neighborhood. And remember, I had not talked. I couldn't get in touch with her. All the phones were jammed. All the cell phone networks were overloaded, and so I had not been able to speak with her probably 3 hours. And
Hmm.
so to be able to see your wife and your young child, and that was the most one of the most memorable reunions I've ever had with my family.
Yeah, and so much of the coverage, and deservedly so, was on New York City because of the size and the scope and the scale of the damage. And then our focus shifted to Washington D.C. and it shifted to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and it's like, what's going on? To me, one of the I remember at the time the afternoon of September 11th, as the day went along. Somewhere along the way, my anger shifted and was elevated when it became clear they're going to cancel college football this weekend. And I know that's a trite thing to think or even to remember, but I'm like, these people have disrupted our way of life. Let's not let them win. Let's play football. Obviously, that didn't make sense that weekend, but when we did return to fields and courts, it was almost like a reunion, and it was almost like a relief, and sports became an outlet for so many people to kind of separate themselves from the devastation and all of the serious news.
Yeah, I remember after the event, my dad, who was a logger, he was in the woods that morning. He comes back to his log truck and he picks up his cell phone and he has 57 missed calls.
Oh, wow.
Everyone back home in Newton County calling him to check on me to see how I was and my wife Celeste was, two Newton Countyans in DC. And I remember him telling people, he said, "I'm not worried about my son. If I know him, when it hits the fan, he's just going to walk out of there." And that's exactly what I did.
Literally
Um,
what you
eh,
did.
yeah, and I had some other friends from Neshoba County who were already scheduled to come visit us. Like I want to say 2 weeks later, and already booked their flights, already had the trip planned, and they had called not long after, you know, questioning whether they should still come. And I said, absolutely, we are not going to let the terrorists change our way of life, change our culture. If we allow that to happen, they have won. And so they did
Well,
come. We had a great time, but
Mike, from time to time you will see a map that shows at any given time what the air traffic is in and around the United States. And you can even find maps that show it globally. And it's astonishing just how many airplanes are in the sky at any given time, any time of the day, 24 hours a day. To me, one of the lasting, not images, but the understanding that air travel in the United States stopped. Zero planes in the sky outside of military planes for about 48 hours following those attacks, and unprecedented since.
yeah. And the thing that really has stuck with me since that day is, um, politics was just as nasty back in the early 2000s, late 1990s. But what stuck with me after 9/11 was the way that Republicans and Democrats came together. Yes, we still disagreed on policy, but it was hopeful in the sense that it showed that we as Americans, Democrat or Republican, can come together for the betterment of our country and to support each other, even when we disagree. And that's what we have to remind our young people today. Frankly, that's what we have to remind each other today.
Yeah.
That at the end of the day, we are all Americans.
I've seen a number of people, and I'm not old enough to remember this, that have pointed to the 1960s as an incredibly divisive time, 60s into the early 70s, incredibly divisive time with presidential assassinations, presidential candidate assassinations, the vitriol related to the Vietnam War. We've been through dark times as a country. Is there a way back? Is there a scenario where we get back to conversations versus shouting matches, compromise and understanding the other side versus drawing lines in the sand and saying, if you disagree, you are evil?
I'm hopeful there is. I mean, think about how divided we were as a nation during the Civil War. Um, what I would hope and pray is that maybe we put the smartphone down a little bit. Maybe we get off the computer screens a little more. Maybe we don't try to be these keyboard warriors going at each other's throats over political differences. Maybe we sit down across from those we disagree with and just talk. I was talking with a an individual who was in leadership in the Democratic Party yesterday, and we had a great conversation. And this was all before the incident and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It is possible. We just, as Americans, have to recommit to do this.
Mike, I appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing some of your remembrance of 2001, September 11th, and always good to visit. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Richard. Take care.
Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney, Chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party. As we speak, there is a Ground Zero memorial ceremony that is happening in New York City. There will be similar remembrances all across the country, and we are just minutes away from an update from the FBI into the investigation and trying to find the shooter of Charlie Kirk yesterday in Orem, Utah. We're back with you after this. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk, Mississippi.